yes, welcome everyone to GeoHug. So before we kick off today's session, I'd just like to take this time to acknowledge the traditional lands which we're all coming from today. I live on the beautiful lands of the Gadigal of the people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and future. So I'm so excited for today's session with Holly Cooke. So Holly is studying at the University of Adelaide and also working with Oz Minerals. And I had the absolute privilege of presenting alongside Holly last week for the awesome GSQ and UQ teams. And I was blown away with Holly's ability in storytelling and her passion for geoscience. And I cannot wait for all of you to hear from her today and to get totally inspired about the way that you communicate your craft to non-technical humans. So it is going to be an awesome session. I hope you all enjoy it. Please use the chat and we'll open up the floor at the end. And yes, thank you so much, Holly. I'm so grateful to have you on today.
Wonderful. So, no, thanks for having me. It was lovely to meet you last week. It was funny coming together in that sort of chaotic way for the webinar. And so if you did listen to that UQ webinar, you're about to get it again. But I guess repetition is how stories sink in. It's how you learn. So if you've listened to it, whatever. If you haven't, you're in for a good time. So thanks for tuning in. And for those that are live, thank you so much for dropping in. And for anyone who's watching this later on YouTube, awesome stuff. Thank you for dropping by. I'm chatting to you from Ghanaland in Adelaide, South Australia. And I always find professional introductions challenging because I'm very early career and I'm not particularly married to job titles. So how's this? I'm Holly. I see the world through an earth science lens, and I spend a lot of time storytelling geology. I'm 22. I work part-time at Oz Minerals. I'm a subject away from a Bachelor of Science degree. But importantly, today I talk to you simply as Holly, not as Oz, not as Uni Adelaide, just Holly, just a young geoscientist with some thoughts about how we connect people to planet using geoscience. And I wanted to spend my time with you today sharing a perspective. And my talk is really a meander through my perspective, what I'm creating in science media spaces, and why I care about connecting people to planet at all. And I hope to convey the essence of my science communication as one grounded in love for nature and admiration of science, and why the beauty of both resides in connecting nature and science to real people, to real lives. So settle in, bear with me. And what I hope to get out of today is sharing that the geologist's most overlooked resource truly isn't technical. But I suppose that's the hard part, isn't it? So to scene set, I'd like to share with you my inner perspective on the interactions between human and nature and how geoscience paints the picture with me. So I'm just going to paint the picture for some context for you. As geologists, we're trained in the earth. The mechanics of this planet and its history is our specialty. We know how to read rocks as relics of worlds now long gone. So in both a poetic and very real sense, geoscientists are timekeepers. We hold a delicate balance between 4.5 billion years of Earth and a now where humanity seems to have lost touch with how built by nature we are. From our resources, water, energy and clean air, to resilience with natural disasters like floods, bushfires, cyclones, we depend on and are bound by Earth. And in a sense, our concrete cities and aluminium-cased laptops can hold us captive to a lifestyle quite devoid of temporal and natural perspective. How much richer, I'm going to show my roots as a kid who loved documentaries and reading science books, but how much richer does experience become when we know that the iron in our blood was forged in supernovae and the lands that we walk on are physical relics of times humanity is actually too young to know. So in this way, a geologist's grasp on deep time and our balancing act between now and natural history, it builds a blissful and shattering perspective on humankind. So let's come down a level. Let's bring this a bit more grounded in what many geologists deal with day in, day out. Our grasp of time is essential to our craft, and miners really are the beneficiary of the time-traveling geologist. So looking at geology through a resource lens, I live in IOCG country, iron oxide copper gold country, and many deposits in South Australia are geologically positioned nearly 2 billion years ago. Like I said, I work part-time at Oz Minerals. I'm here just as Holly, but a significant part of my life is spent at Oz Minerals. And we mine a beautiful deposit called Carapatina. Now, Carapatina is a chemical glitch of copper gold ore, and it has a 1 billion year long past, yet it fits into humanity's envisioned electrified future. Carrapateena sits within the Gawler Craton's 1.5 billion year long history, but the Earth story doesn't stop or even really start with Carrapateena, because the actual ore lies about 500 metres underground. And just to glimpse the brecciated Donington Sweet granites, you must first time travel through the Neoproterozoic worlds encoded in the 500 metres of overlying sediment. Now, these sediments are the same as those found in the Flinders Ranges, a place with a very special place in my heart and in the science media I create. Now, I'm going to use this Flinders Ranges as a clunky segue to show you how I've been talking to the outside world about geology. So who would have thought I open up with one of the biggest mining projects in SA in a decade, and I end up taking you down the story of its cover sequence. Not quite what you might have expected. And for anyone, I recognise that this GeoHug is a global community. So the Flinders Ranges is a beautiful part of South Australia, just sort of in the centre of our state. It's beautiful mountains. It's got a wonderful geological history that I'm going to take you through. So like I was saying, these overlying sediments of a lot of deposits in the Gawler Craton in South Australia, the overlying sediments are often little wafers of the Wulpina and Umbaratna groups, which are Neoproterozoic sediments that document what I easily think is the most glorious Earth system pivot in geological history. The Umbaratna group brackets the largest, most severe glaciations ever on Earth, where these low latitude glacial deposits in present day South Australia gave the Sturtian and Maranoan snowball Earths their namesake. Wulpina group rocks record Earth's first multicellular life mulling around in shallow tropical deglaciated seas. So from snowball Earth to sea critters, that's a marvel. It feels tragic to view this remarkable Earth history simply as Gawler Craton cover. It's the stratigraphy of ancient life above the lithologies of future metal. Now, the temporal symbiosis of rocks is mind-shattering. And herein lies the overlooked overlying resource, the value of teaching the mysteries of our home planet to others, the value of storytelling, a geoscientific perspective of nature, so that we can softly ground people in a sense of place on planet. It's a shame that there's no JORC code for connecting people to the Earth history behind the asset. So as I began uncovering these geological stories in my backyard, I couldn't leave them alone. Exploring the geology here genuinely ignited something in me that wasn't resolved by studying more or by reading more literature. The stories here yielded power to shift people's perspectives on nature, on themselves, on how we know Earth, on how we live on top of Earth, on how we interact with the planet. So really being led by creative feeling, I picked up a camera and started filming mountains, filming clouds, filming myself talking about mountains and clouds, filming my uni friends on fieldwork. And it all started and still comes from a place of pure creative fulfillment and a love of sharing science. The brief strategic thoughts I had when I started somewhat randomly filming were, who's my audience? Well, my peers. And like I said, I'm in my early 20s. My peers, maybe my 17-year-old sister, mostly young people. Now, I think young people are our biggest opportunity and our biggest critics. My 17-year-old sister is both a cheerleader of mine and someone who whips me into shape about what she thinks about the world I engage in mining. So as young people, as our biggest opportunity and our biggest critics, we need to get a dialogue going with them. So what's my distribution? Well, my platform was social media, my own personal socials at the time, and my message, curiosity, curiosity, and more curiosity. Indulge in it. Be led by questions rather than answers, and let scientific wonder guide your travels through nature. Start here, and you can create a geoscientist out of anyone. So perhaps I'm thinking I will share with you some of the videos and some of the context. This one, I called it 10 Days of Earth Science. Really, it was I filmed it while I was on a university field trip up in the northern Flinders Ranges. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Flinders, that the background to this slide is just a bit of a false colour image of the Flinders taken. I think the European Space Agency has this one. But this was taken on a uni field trip to the northern Flinders Ranges. And what I really wanted to do is start authentically capturing the happiness and how alive fieldwork made me feel. If there are any geologists in the room, I'm preaching to the converted. Being out in the field, there's nothing like it. It really speaks to who we are. Being out in the rocks that encode the nature that you want to understand, being in a community with, as you're chatting to people around you, that like the geological community is just alive when you're out in the field. And I wanted to capture not only that, but find a clever way to then share what we're actually learning, what we're learning out in the field about our Flinders Ranges. And I wanted to capture that all authentically, all in a way that didn't look marketed. It didn't look like an ad for studying geology. It was just a raw essence of what it means to be a geologist out in the field. So I've got it's probably 30 seconds or so, just a bit of a teaser. Hopefully this works.
Jessica Walsh. I'm working in the critical minerals space, and this is super cool because it's this transition into, you know, the renewable green energy type sector.
All the resources that we use every day need to come from somewhere, so being a geologist we get to have a pretty helping hand with where they come from and how to find them.
The Earth is 4.5 billion years old and there's a lot of questions still to answer.
I look at how South Australia looked 1.6 billion years ago to help explorers find more copper in the future.
As you can see, that I talk about a community. I went to University of Adelaide, and you can see postdocs, PhDs. Everyone wants to get in and be involved, get in and be part of that teaching spirit. And some of the younger undergraduate students, they're my cohort, and I'm really proud of where some of them have gone. Some have completed honours, moving into state for jobs, going to a PhD. So yeah, I've got great friends in the space. And you may have noticed and I'll touch on authenticity a bit later in my talk, but you'll see that there's flies. I don't know if you noticed the flies that are like hitting the camera. People are hot and sweaty and the audio is a bit dodgy, but as I'll explain a bit later, this is sort of where the charm is. And like I said, I started creating these videos from a place of just creative fulfillment. I can't dance, can't sing, can't draw, but weirdly enough, I really enjoy putting together this kind of media. Not very well. I'm not great at editing, but you have to start somewhere. But this sort of did the rounds in university, and it surprised me how much people seem to enjoy just the short snippets of honest insight about what geoscience actually looks like. Now, on this trip, I met a geologist by the name of Steve Hoare. He works in the Geological Survey of South Australia, and knowing him, he would just about die if he knew I was talking about him to an audience. But he noticed me stuffing my camera gear into my backpack and weirdly filming people in the background. And Steve at the time was helping the government put together a video pertaining to the ediacron golden spike and the UNESCO Flinders Ranges World Heritage nomination. This World Heritage nomination is going on in the background, has been for the last couple of years, and it will continue to be for the next few. But it's a really cool achievement for the Flinders Ranges should it actually get nominated for World Heritage. Now, I mentioned this ediacron golden spike, so I'll bank the story about Steve and the World Heritage nomination and just actually let you know what's going on here. So you can see that I'm sort of pointing to and fluffing around a piece of bronze that's stuck on a rock. And what I was saying to you earlier about the Flinders Ranges chronicling a pivot from snowball earth glaciations to warm seas and tropical life, we know that story through the rocks. And it's also a story of time. And I'm talking 600-700 million years ago. And to the average person, that is mind-boggling, that time. And it's even more mind-boggling when you say to them, we bookmark time through our rocks. So the ediacron golden spike is what I'm pointing to. And it's essentially a bookmark in time. It's the geologist's way of saying this is a moment in time of great Earth system change. And we have 4.5 billion years of Earth history. We need to bookmark ourselves. We need to know where we're at. And so this bookmark, this golden spike, it's the only one in the Southern Hemisphere, and it chronicles the transition into Earth's first complex life. It is just remarkable. The reason we understand the Earth history that surrounds these rocks in this area, like the glaciations, is because of paleomagnetic data. And that came from sampling the rocks. And all that paleomagnetic data tells us is the latitude of the continents at the time that the rock was forming. Now, when this rock was forming, the deglaciated rocks that tell us that the Earth was melting down from being frozen, the paleomagnetic data, which was drilled from these little small, you can see like little small drill holes around that bronze golden spike, they tell us that Australia was in the tropics. It was a low latitude. And that's a funky way of saying if Australia is at the equator and it has rocks that tell us that glaciations were occurring, that must have been a mental world. That was a world very, very cold if it's that cold at the equator. And so with the Flinders Ranges going up for World Heritage nomination, that's a bit technical for the average person. That's not something you'd ordinarily know. And so those little drill holes in the rocks, they just kind of look like graffiti or a crack. Like it's weird we can't expect the average person to know that those holes are there because of paleomagnetic data drilling. They just look a bit strange. And so Steve brought me along to help tell this story of paleomagnetic data and the holes that it leaves behind as actually being an artifact of science, an artifact of research. And this experience taught me a bit about, firstly, I was only a third-year student at the time. I'd only just finished learning about this kind of stuff from my university professors 3-4 weeks ago. It felt a bit fraudulent for me to then go and try and teach that to someone else. And it taught me a bit about you can't please everyone because there's always a technical audience that wants you to communicate as many technical heavy details as possible. But then I've got my 17-year-old sister who wants a 7-second explanation and a dance at the same time. So it's a funny and complicated and critical thinking exercise to try and bring rocks to life in a manner that satisfies technical audiences and satisfies the imagination of public audiences. So then the Flinders Ranges is my favourite place on Earth. So it was a very rewarding exercise, and I feel lucky to still be involved in the process of the Flinders Ranges nomination today. A bit of nerdy time. Remember I was talking about these rocks that show us that glaciers were hanging around the place. I just wanted to give you an example of why we know that. You can see here, you probably can't see my mouse, but you can see my hand fluffing around and it's banging on a boulder. And if you look around, a boulder really has no business being in that kind of rock. What is a boulder doing there? Well, the answer is that when sea ice and glaciers are melting, they've previously bulldozed a bunch of stuff from land, a bunch of rocks from land. They're just bulldozing the land as they move through, and they're collecting boulders and bits and stuff. And as they start melting, these boulders that were once sort of hugged by an iceberg or hugged by a glacier just start plopping out as the ice melts. And so we call this a tillite. We call this like a glacial deposit rock. And the Flinders Ranges is littered with these tillites that tell us that glaciers were once in the area. And that's me trying to explain that to a non-technical audience. So at the same time as filming this video for Department of Environment and Water, who were running the World Heritage nomination, I was asked by the university to do a uni takeover, which is of their Instagram, which was like, I get access to their Instagram for a day, and it's a way to sort of pique some interest in geology for students at the university. And communicating via social media, science via social media, presents an age-old but interesting dynamic for me. And it's sort of what I was talking about before, which is how can you dilute science into creative packages, creative chapters, 15-second videos in a manner that still maintains technical integrity? Crafting science into stories means stripping away jargon and detail, but you've got to walk the line of our finite knowledge. Science is an evolving sphere of knowledge, but it is finite. But what sometimes geological data presents very wacky, very imaginative worlds. And it's often these wacky, imaginative worlds that get the public interested, but sometimes maintaining the technical integrity of your story can be challenging. And my own personal dilemma is I don't always enjoy being on social media. And it'll be funny to hear me say that, because what I'll talk about over the coming slides is how important it is for us to be getting on social media. But I'll be the first to admit I don't actually always enjoy being on it. Social media can be a time thief, and the ethics of the algorithm kingdom is unclear to me. And more than anything else, look at the beautiful landscape I'm in, right? And I'm staring at myself on my phone, and it really was only a couple minutes, and a lot of good came out of being on the university's Instagram and sharing these stories. It actually got a lot of engagement. But I recognize that social media isn't always a fun game. It can just look like a 22-year-old being a narcissistic so-and-so. So my logic is I can critique social media from the sidelines, or I can get into the garbage bin myself and figure it out. And I err on the side of being a force for good, a force for learning, a force for connection in arenas that are sometimes devoid of all three. So Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, it's where we've got to go. Now, as I started realizing that there was a real place for these kinds of creative science videos, I started putting my resources cap on and thinking, okay, people are very interested about the Earth. And when you wrap it up in a way that doesn't look like science, it looks like a story, they're even more interested in the Earth. Now, what I know as an early career geologist in mining is that our understanding of Earth is absolutely foundational to natural resources and how we resource energy. Those resources I was listing in the intro, our energy, building materials, industrial minerals, whatever you want to call it. Earth science is foundational to our natural resources. So I wanted to maintain the imaginative, creative storytelling thread of Earth science and weave in a bit of the natural resources story. And in particular, what is big with young people, no shock, no surprise, is climate change. It's renewable energy, it's wind turbines. And as geologists, we have, and particularly mining professionals, we all have different criticisms and opinions and perspectives on what people should or should not be thinking about how we resource clean energy. But I tried to bring it back to the perspective of my 17-year-old sister, bring it back to the perspective of school strikes for climate, bring it back to my own perspective of, I just love nature. And it's the same love of nature that means I understand how to resource copper. So all of these ideas I tried to make into a video. I called it Sea Floors and Copper Ores. If you're South Australian, this was filmed in Wollonga. Beautiful part of the Fleurieu Peninsula. And this was filmed with the equipment, camera gear and support of Nexus National Exploration Undercover School, run by Dr. Richard Lilly, and a legend of a man. He helped me put this one together. But I'd like to share it with you. It's about 3 minutes. I've since cut my hair off, but that's about the only thing that's changed. And again, I learned a lot about editing. I've learned a lot about how to communicate from this kind of video. And I look at it now and kind of cringe, but hopefully it means something to you. About 500 million years ago, Earth's first complex life scurried around on an ancient South Australian sea floor. This rock here, this actually used to form the bottom of this ancient early life ocean. See, over time, all that sand at the bottom of the sea floor, it gets buried, it gets compacted, and then it was actually squidged up to form mountains and make rocks that we now see on land. I've got a secret though. This rock here, this one in particular, this is no ordinary rock. It's quite remarkable actually. In fact, your life somewhat depends on it. Confused? Hang in there. Let's talk metal. You, 1.4 million. I mean, 75 elements go into making your smartphone, but it's even bigger than you. So where does all this metal come from? Rocks. Metals start their lives inside of rocks. This ocean floor rock has copper locked inside of it. Copper that we then use to build our lives. Rocks are time travelers. They chronicle deep Earth history, way before humans, billions of years before humans. They tell of past worlds, past climate, past disasters, past life. And so earth science, as the study of this planet, including her rocks, becomes such a meaningful gateway to appreciating, forging connection with, and understanding our only home. And these guys, the metal locked up inside the rocks that tell these stories, well, they help us build the lives that we want to lead on our blue planet. At the end of the day, we need geology to find the minerals and metals that will build our future. We need you to listen to and understand the heartbeat of our planet so that you can create solutions and hope using geoscience. Mostly, it starts with asking questions, with asking about our ancient South Australian seafloor. It starts with knowing your home. Mostly, it starts with rocks. All right, so I'm not at all one for watching myself back. I avoid it at all costs, but I did want to share that to give you an idea of how we can start building this bridge of connection between, yes, we need to resource minerals and metals. Yes, mining runs the world, but also you can do that through loving nature. You can do that through asking questions about the natural world. So speaking of social media, these videos did the rounds on Instagram and LinkedIn mostly, and they seemed to fill a void that we didn't really know we had. They showed, they showed non-geologists the beauty of our craft and scratched an itch in career geologists about why they loved their work in the first place. And I guess the videos brought me some visibility because I found myself with the opportunity to be involved with some small South Australian initiatives. And this let me take my outreach from social media into a place where I could physically meet students and talk to them as real people. And importantly, it wasn't in a classroom. And I say that with an asterisk because I've spent a lot of time in classrooms teaching kids. I did a lot of work at University of Adelaide as a STEM communicator, where I'd go and present physics, chemistry, rocket launching, weird science experiments, maths is cool workshops to really years 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And I did a bit of work with Nexus and presenting geology focused workshops into high schools. And I used to play that video I just showed you. I used to play that to warm us up for what we were about to go through in a class. And that video, in a sense, was crafted a lot more for classroom use than it was for any sort of social media popularity. And it proved to be a good resource in classrooms, a good 3-minute goldfish attention span visual hit. But yeah, I've spent a lot of my time in classrooms, and interacting with kids in classrooms has taught me a lot about what I understand works with young audiences. You know, a year 9 classroom at 3 p.m. on a Friday in a non-air conditioned room, they don't lie, right? You know when something is landing, and you know when something is not when you're talking to a bunch of 14-year-olds. Facial expressions don't lie. It's brutal. But I'm thankful for the experiences because it's like I said, it's informed a lot of how I talk to young audiences now. My concern with pure classroom outreach, and I don't mean to single out classroom outreach because it's a very important part of our outreach, but the concern with that alone as our form of outreach to younger audiences is that the magnitude of the facelift that geology needs in the public sphere, I can't do that in a 40-minute classroom lesson at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, right? The magnitude of the facelift that geology and resources and mining needs cannot be done in a 40-minute classroom lesson without any follow-up. I would argue that after years of doing this, and classroom sessions done well work, but then where's the follow-through? Where are the social media presences? When they log on to TikTok and when they're getting on their algorithms, where is that message getting reinforced? Where's it getting reinforced in Netflix documentaries? Where is it getting reinforced in the books they're reading? Where is it getting reinforced in what they're being taught in a curriculum? I'd argue that without follow-up, without cultural sentiment changing about the beauty of geology and the necessity of geology and resources, that follow-through I don't really see being had. And yet we're all scratching our heads wondering why kids go into environmental science instead of geology. It's because the profile of environmental sciences culturally is better. Environmental engineering is seen as the savior of the climate change generation. Why isn't geology? I'd say it's because our culture in the public sphere, we aren't changing that. It's stagnating. And I don't think that stagnation can be rectified through classroom outreach only. So it's difficult to bring, geology is all about the outside world, right? It's all about connecting to nature, all about being in the field. Well, not all about, but for me at least, it's about being outside and being one with it all. And it's difficult to bring that outside world to a classroom. So that's why I'm actually thrilled to have the totally world-class South Australian drill core library on my back door, or as I call it, the Library of Nature, when I take kids through. It's awesome when kids come and I'm able to have workshops or shoot videos there, because when you say drill core library, that's just, what is that? Books? Is it a dusty ancient bookshelf? And it's not. It's a whopping library of what's under our feet. And it's a beautiful building in Tonsley in Adelaide, for anyone who's tuning in from Adelaide. Now, in the last 6 months, I've been doing some more work, outreach. I've had some more experiences there, really just grabbing whatever's available and running with it, nothing too serious or paid. But I wanted to share some of those experiences just to see if anything that I experienced resonates, or perhaps gives you an idea of how you can be talking to younger audiences. So on the left there, I was shooting a video as part of a video series for the Commissioner for Young People and Children, something like that, on future work. So it was designed to show year 10s, 11s, 12s, that younger audience, about what different careers and different spaces look like. And I remember being in year 12 and thinking I was making life-changing decisions based on what I chose to enroll in university. Like, you really think you're defining your life at 18, and you can't talk down on that. We all felt it when we're 18, but then you grow up and you realize that, wow, that's I build my own career each day at a time, not based on the decisions I made when I was 18. But anyway, and I was able to talk about my career so far, and that sounds hilarious to say because I'm 22 and haven't figured anything out yet. So I thought to myself, what would I want to hear if I was young and I wanted to have a purpose-driven career, and I saw climate change everywhere in the news. I saw mining was just filled with hard hats and maybe a bit of a dirty, dusty gig that I didn't want to be a part of. Like, what would I want to hear? I was a big greenie. I loved chemistry. I liked camping. And I was also a huge perfectionist when I was in year 12. Good grades were everything to me. And then I realized that sometimes you need to fail sometimes to learn the most. So in this video, I was honest, and I spoke about how my world looks and how geological curiosity about the natural world led me to where I am today. And as I alluded to, I mentioned that an important part of my journey to get into geology, to get into my jobs, to get into my outreach, was hitting roadblocks. It was hitting rock bottom. I could not pass a physics or a math subject in university in first year to save my life. I just couldn't. And that was devastating, because all I wanted to be when I was young was an astrophysicist. I wanted to be an astronomer. I wanted to work in the mechanics of the universe. And yet my first year of uni, I couldn't pass maths or physics. Now, that was shattering. I thought my world was ending. I was embarrassed, and I had a couple of days of just down in the dumps. But then you have the realization, or rather you give yourself permission to reevaluate or reconsider what makes you tick, what sets your soul on fire, what ignites curiosity. And for me, it had been an elective, and that elective was called Building a Habitable Planet, and it was geology. And I sort of gave myself permission to change tack, to let my interest guide me, not what I thought I wanted to do, but just sort of strip everything down and go with curiosity. And that was the main message that I put in that video, if the young South Australians will see. And that's permission to let curiosity and renewed evolving interests guide your decisions. And I think that's being honest and vulnerable and authentic to yourself. And sometimes that means uncomfortable times in your life, or reevaluating what your 18-year-old self thought you were destined to do. That's an important part. It's an important acknowledgement to make in very formative years of a young person's life. Now, on the right, I designed and hosted tours for South Australia, about 100 South Australian high school students, as part of what was called Future Energy Week at the Tonsley Innovation District here in Adelaide, South Australia. And what I saw happening was these kids were going through, it was all in the name of clean energy, all in the name of all in the name of clean energy in South Australia. And kids were going to hydrogen electrolyzers, they were building lithium ion batteries, they were, going into solar cars. And yet the drill core library with the minerals and metals in the rocks of the future was not getting touched. It just sat there silently. And I thought, that's a joke. Let's fix that, because I'm probably talking to a converted audience when I say that minerals and metals is an absolutely foundational part of clean energy, and yet doesn't get a lot of limelight, doesn't get a lot of discussion, especially in young people. So I was really proud to be able to design and host these tours for young kids that were there to learn about clean energy. And what I found, the geological concepts that I found resonated were deep time. I was showing them Carrapateena core. I was telling them that as you touch these rocks, you're touching nearly 2 billion years of Earth history. I spoke to them about how hydrogen was the most abundant element in our universe, and how sort of a really cool part of geology now is finding where hydrogen, natural hydrogen occurs on Earth, native hydrogen occurs on Earth, so that we can build our hydrogen energy storage plants or whatever. So sort of wrapping up that curiosity and quietly bringing in a conversation about resources, but first focusing on that curiosity element. So I've just spoken that the geological concepts that stuck with the young kids is really deep time. It's this sense of time. But what feelings resonate? Because as I was saying before, connecting the bridge between geoscience and the public, it's not a technical task. And I think the tone of our general outreach has got to change. Authenticity and honesty, so vulnerability, mistakes, my weird sense of humor, videos that aren't edited that well, admitting when I don't know things, presenting authentically matters. You know, I like wearing bright colors and big earrings, and I don't really like the way a hard hat makes my hair look. And so being honest to your character lights a spark, builds a connection to young people, much more powerful than anything scientific can teach them. And it's sort of a barrier between, I don't have to look like what they expect me to look like, and that element of surprise when you're talking to a 15-year-old, it works, it matters, it does the job, This other thing, psychological safety and freedom to question. Mining has a shot image in the public, and especially among young people. And I say that as someone who's working in mining, so I'm not coming for you. I'm just sort of trying to state a fact. We have bad PR problem. And we are criticized in a lot of different circles, not in a lot of different non-mining circles, that by people who might not understand that bridge that we build between everyday life and natural resources. And so when I've got a group of young people who are wanting to hear about renewable clean energy, and I start going on about mining, it's a little uncomfortable. So what I try and do is create an environment of safety, it's a buzzword, psychological safety, and the freedom to question, the freedom to criticize, which is, I'm not going to be defensive about an industry that, it doesn't have a clean rap. Being defensive puts your guards up, it builds a wall to young people that I'm trying to invite in. And so a freedom to question me, a freedom to question mining, and instead of getting defensive, being honest about our problems, being honest about our challenges. And in that way, we can be honest about, we have interesting technical challenges to solve. Mining is an interesting technical industry, but we can't communicate that if we're too busy defending ourselves and trying to be assertive to a young generation that is also assertive. You know, one of us has to back down, and it's not going to be them. So building this idea of, you can question me, and you're safe here, and you're able to ask me about events or about reasons why I'm here. A effective two-way conversation comes from letting the other party feel like they can ask you about why you're in there at all, why you're in mining at all. And this other thing, a sense of place and time. It's essentially what I've been banging on about this whole time, which is geology offers a unique insight and a unique window in time to different landscapes, ancient worlds, the wonder and curiosity and the imagination that goes into geology. That sticks with kids. And that is a natural gateway into resources. So rather than sort of starting with you need mining in your life, start with how weird is copper on the seafloor? And then get to mining. Take them on the journey. It's taking these young kids on the journey rather than just sort of shoving a mining message in their face. So to try and articulate what I've been saying a little bit better, I've got notes here because I sometimes go on weird tangents. But I've tried to wrap up this talk in a manner which is totally inspired by the ethos of my workplace culture. Oz has a wonderful perspective on what different value looks like. So I thought, I can weave that into my talk. So I'm going to attempt to reframe geological value for you. So often, and understandably so, we're so enamored by science, by data, by our technical craft, that we forget to build connection from people to planet. And this ragged disconnect is evident in social, technical, and corporate discourse today. We all are in our little echo chambers and silos. We're feeling the same tension. We have corporate ESG sentiments about social license being harder to attain. And then we have Instagram accounts and school strikes for climate who are angry at extractive industries for destroying our natural home. And then we have geos who are out collecting rocks, drilling holes, feeling at home in the field, and often feeling misunderstood by a society that harshly judges mining. And no one can seem to talk to each other. We haven't yet tugged the common thread. Like I was saying, mining companies often conduct outreach by finger wagging and rightly reminding the world of their material lives. Now, like I've said, I've bided my time at 2:30 on a Tuesday in a classroom relaying this material world message. And it is true, but it's not resonating, not in its current format. The story of the sheer quantity of metal, mineral, and energy resources the world uses is compelling, but does this true but depressing narrative connect us? It hasn't so far, and I don't think it will. So how else do we tell our story? How do we bring others on this people and planet journey? I'd assert that the common thread has been there all along. It's both sides of the same coin, its connection to Earth. Whether it's exploration and mining geos, knowing the Earth for her minerals and metals, or whether it's Gen Z knowing the Earth is suffocating under a plume of a century of fossil fuels. Both experiences are valid, both perspectives are valid and legitimate, and building the bridge between the two isn't a technical task, it's a human one. So in a world with deep social currents of environmentalism, school strikes for climate, of slow fashion, sustainable social media movements, in a world of electrification, decarbonisation, rampant corporate greenwashing, in a world of disconnect between all of these bubbles, a very powerful force for good is the geologists speaking their truth. Yielding our training as a force for storytelling to bridge people and planet. And as one of many custodians of Earth knowledge, let's share our curiosity with other people, other industries, new generations, and get on social media because the bridge is ours for the building. Now, I'm still playing with how I create science media, what formats I enjoy storytelling in, and how I develop face-to-face workshops in South Australia. And so I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm still figuring this all out. And it's difficult to navigate content creation. And like I was saying, social media doesn't always come easy to me. I mix all of this in with student tours. I've only recently found a way to consolidate my storytelling work in a more cohesive sense than just Instagram posts. So if any of my sentiment here resonated with you, you're welcome to keep up to date with what I'm doing via the GeoCo. It hasn't launched yet, no promises. It might not launch for a while, but if you follow the QR code, I can be in touch with you when it does. And this GeoCo is my way of trying to consolidate all these different storytelling threads that are going on, like videos and tours and outreach, into one sort of media space. So that was a lot. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can hear Jess. I've got no idea if I'm over or under time, but thank you very much for joining me. And Jess, thank you very much for having me on.